Hi, everyone. Welcome to our August Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll make our intro really brief so we can have as much time for a conversation. Our guest speakers today are Sili, Savusa, and Garcia from the White Center CDA. We are going to hear about their experience with the White Center Hub project. And we are so excited to learn about their processes they've navigated the development process. A little bit about NDC. We're a national nonprofit organization working in economic development finance for the last 50 years. And this Lunch and Learn series is in partnership with King County Communities of Opportunity and the City of Seattle's Equitable Development Initiative. And as a note, this event is being recorded. So I will go ahead and hand it to Alicia to introduce our facilitator.
We're joined today by Kalayaan Domingo, who's the project manager with Public Health Seattle and King County, working with King County Communities of Opportunity on a public-private community initiative that's funded by King County through Best Starts for Kids and the Seattle Foundation, and approaches social change through partnerships and community-led solutions, working to shift policies, systems, and relationship toward a just and equitable future and a healthy and thriving King County. Thank you so much for joining us to interview our guests today, and we're really excited for the question and answer period at the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Alicia. My name again is Kalayaan, and I have the privilege of working with the White Center Partnership in my Communities of Opportunity work. I have the opportunity to work alongside both Aaron and Sili as they work on this project. I'm really excited to hear their learnings and wisdom today. So I'm going to be facilitating, and we're going to have lots of room for question and answers. So Aaron Garcia is the White Center Hub Community Manager, project manager. He sent this to me yesterday in all caps text. I want to open it up to look at it. But
I think that means you have to shout it high.
It's the Hub Project Manager, excuse me. And Sili Savusa, the Executive Director of the White Center CDA. So we're going to get started. And Aaron, I'm just going to ask you to give us a little bit of background about the project that you've been working on, the White Center Hub. Can you give us some context around what the project is and how it came to be?
For sure. I'm excited to say I've been at the CDA, I think 5 years now. And I always like to preface this with my background isn't really in development. So me and Kai actually go way, way back. We used to work together at Cleveland High School way before all this. So my background is in education and post-secondary access programming. And I kind of, like the nonprofit life, you kind of just stumbled into an amazing organization that is aligned with my values, with what I wanted to do with community work. And the reason I preface this is I don't wear a traditional developer hat. But for this project, it's been going on. It's been the dream of the community for the last 19 years that the CDA has been around as an organization. And little by little, when I started working at the CDA, we realized, hey, if we truly wanted to do this development work that is authentically owned and managed and ran by the community, then we need to build up the community's capacity to be able to lead this work. So even though I come here without necessarily, saying that I'm a master of what development looks like, I've spent the better part of the last 3 years trying to figure this out and how to do this authentically on behalf of community. So the hub, it's two things. It's about 25,000 square feet of a community space, community center, commercial space. And it's 76 units of affordable housing. And it's been just a process that we have been working in partnership with a lot of amazing partners. The community center is going to be a space for us, Southwest Youth and Family Services, Health Point, Yes Foundation, a lot of smaller community-based orgs. And we'll get into the weeds of it. And the housing development is a partnership between us and Community Roots Housing. So that was a little high level. kind of intro of how we got here.
Thanks so much, Aaron. I understand that you all have a short video that you've put together that you're going to share today.
Sure. Actually, this is an award, a recognition that we got on behalf of the King County Green Globe Awards last year. So let me pull this up real quick. And someone let me know if you can't hear the audio. The Hub stands for Hope, Unity, and Belonging, and it is an affordable housing development and a new community center for White Center.
We plan on building 76 units of affordable housing, ranging from studios to 4-bedroom units. And then we're also building about a 25,000-foot community service center with healthcare, educational programming, family services, and it will be the headquarters of the White Center Community Development Association.
The organizations that comprise of the White Center Community Hub are being awarded King County's Green Globe Leader in Green Affordable Housing.
We're seeing a lot of gentrification and displacement pressure in areas like White Center. So this project is directly addressing that and specifically trying to create housing for immigrant and refugee families that have been displaced from other neighborhoods before. We want to make sure that they have a place in White Center to call home.
For the last couple of years, something that we've heard often from our residents is that we wanted a place to do community building events and programming. As an organization, we have a commitment to advocating for affordable housing, making sure that our residents don't get displaced by some of the economic pressures that we're feeling seeping our way. And this project embodies that vision and mission to grow the community without displacing the community.
This could become a concept that continues to replicate to ensure that affordable housing, healthy affordable housing, is here for the people who need it most.
I now wear this kind of community developer hat, but really at the end of the day, I'm a resident. I'm somebody who grew up here, who was raised here, and I want to make sure that this project embodies the spirit of White Center. Everybody should have an opportunity to live in a community where you feel like you belong.
Thank you. That was beautiful. It was really, it's been really important to hear about the ways in which you've engaged community. And I've been able to hear that working alongside you all for the last 4 years. I'd like to invite you, Sili, to join our conversation. And as it was shared in the video, that you and Aaron are both residents of White Center and longtime advocates within the community. This work is really personal, and keeping community centered has been part of your mission and vision since the beginning. Can you speak to more of the ways in which you have engaged and embedded community in this process?
Yeah, so hi, everybody. I feel like I'm with all my social justice warriors today. Very happy to see all of you and really happy to talk about this work. The community has been involved from the beginning, and I want to also say that on the onset of the development of this project, there was the commitment to also honoring the land on which this project will sit. And so we've been diligent and purposeful in not only the conversations, but also trying to put in place in policy how the Duwamish will benefit as a result of this. Ultimately, we want to see this land returned to the Duwamish tribe. We know that as a country, we sit on native land. And I am being told over and over the best way to honor native tribes is to give them back their land. So different kinds of conversations that we're trying to bring to the table around community development. We know that we hold a lot of the work that's happening throughout the community in this project. Residents have been involved We've had a number of conversations where the residents have been at the table with us everywhere from the beginning inception, actually to the design where we currently are at, finalizing a lot of the details. And what you see and what Adon talked about was really as a result of what the community wants. And so the other thing I want to say really quickly is that it's no surprise to me that communities of color aren't developing more, because the access that we have as people of color and as communities, as BIPOC communities, is very limited. And so a lot of my meetings where I'm dealing with the financing, it's all white faces. And so, how do we lift up, Black owned, BIPOC owned, design, even everything from the folks that'll ultimately be into this. How do we center community around this project and really kind of model for partners who we know want to do this work as well? How do we help set the table for them? And so, that's a lot of these conversations don't happen at a very technical level, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And but one of the things that I know that Adon and I make really clear to our partners who are part of the project, that the hub, this belongs to White Center, and that we're the boss around all this work, and that the wealth and the abundance of wealth that will be a direct result of this project is because of the wealth the community brings. And so I want to say that to folks. I know I see Skyway on the line, Tita Ross from the Kamai community. We just had a conversation yesterday about, displacement, gentrification. So we want to use this project as something that we can all learn from. The hub is bigger than White Center. This is about how do we put humanity back in the world of community development. I'm not saying that it's not there, but how do we really center community and residents, and how do we really make sure that their voice is authentic in this process, and that the community, folks who lived here, who have been here for generations, including businesses, how do we make sure that they're part of this work?
Thanks so much, Sili. Adon, would you be able to give some examples about the ways in which you've actually integrated community voice into some of the practices or some of the planning? What did that look like to bring community in?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, the number one thing I think was having the ability to have a dedicated person from the community to build up the capacity and learn. So me and Sili being able to focus directly on this project and not having to, I was saying this earlier, before having support from COO and before this, I was literally the jack of all trades. I was doing a little bit of economic development, a little bit of our family development programming, or a little bit, at one point I was literally picking up garbage from our business corridor because we didn't have anybody, because the county just didn't have that dedicated resource to help do local garbage pickup. And then in the last three years, I think we've been able to get enough support resources to be able to say, all right, this is going to be the full-time job. You're going to figure out what does it mean to do development. And then, like I always say this, I'm excited about this project, but really what I'm excited about is how do we take this project and figure out how to do future projects that are even more aligned with our values. Because there's so many things about development that I'm like, man, this isn't how I would want to do it. This is how you have to do it because this is the resources that are in place. This is how policies and systems are in place. But I don't think we've been really able to live the dream of how we really wanted to see housing in our community. Because yeah, there's just so many things about how things are and how we want to change the system that aren't there yet. But I think this is the first step to going over there. But anyway, jump back to your question. We've also like pre-pandemic, we were also doing quarterly signature events, and every time we had those events, there was always a component of it that we allowed to get feedback from our community. We were making sure that even when we got to some of the design phase of things, that we allowed community to be part of the design process, be part of creating, shaping, molding what the space was going to look like, guide us and how we were going to even throw out the space. Just quick shout out, Grace Leong is on here, and she was able to help us make sure that we were really having community input in our process from the beginning. I think the biggest thing is how can we make sure it's not just about like informing, right? It's one thing to like, I could just send out a mailer and you've been informed, but it's really like, how do you shift the paradigm and include folks? And acknowledge that we haven't done it always perfectly 100% of the time, but I always look at what we do compared to what some of the other bigger developers that have come into the community and what they've done. And we've done like 1,000,000 times more outreach than any of the other privately funded developers out there. So I'm like, we're doing something a lot different.
The other thing, if I can just interject, as a result of the Hub project, I was asked to come and speak at architects conference that they had. And, once again, very white. I could probably count on one hand how many designers of color were actually on that conference call with me. But one of the basic questions that I asked them that doesn't cost anybody anything was ask the developer, when you get assigned to a project and you get hired for a project, I want you to ask them, how has the community touched this project? Where's the accountability to the project that you're going to have me work on? And see if they can give you a feel of the community that the work is happening. And if they say, oh, well, we haven't, call them on it. And call them on it, tell them. And, I also said, if you want to push them, say, well, part of my involvement will be for you to do your homework on the community. So that's another way that we've been trying to really elevate and get other folks involved in this. We are part of COO, Communities of Opportunity. One of the things that I told Kai, I said, Kai, we need a coach. Adon and I, we come from education. We don't know this, but we know this community. And I just want to say that to all of you. You may not know a lot about community development, but you know who you work with. You know who your community is. That's all you need to do this work. And you just surround yourselves with folks who kind of know this. And I asked Kai, we need money for somebody to coach us, for somebody to help us to ask the right questions, to make sure who are the people that we connect with, to ask questions from a BIPOC perspective. And then talking to people like Estela Ortega at El Centro, who also has quite a bit of development. El Centro has quite a bit of development. But the thing that I sit with that she also told me, Sili, even though I have this stuff all under my belt, I'm still being asked to justify my ability and credibility around development work. And so if that's happening to Estela, who's like a GOAT and a longtime leader in King County, then you already know how they're fucking with us around stuff, around legitimacy. And so we're really happy to be working with Community Roots Housing. And that relationship with Community Roots Housing, that really needs to be solid. And so we need to have conversations with them, reminding them we're the boss, not you, that we're asking you to do this. We're asking you to help build our organization. And we're asking you to trust us in our leadership. And so, again, development projects, just like, the RFP process, it's go, 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 moving pieces. So we've really been insistent on sometimes just stopping where we're at and saying, you know, this feels really funky. Can we talk about this? And the community deserves us. They deserve the ability to really reflect within the middle of a pressing timeline, and to really get people to think about this way when you're thinking about taking care of community. I mean, the Hub project is not only about taking care of community, but it's also a way to help us heal the years of marginalization, but also to help affirm who we are as leaders in work of community. So I just wanted to say that. Sorry, went on.
I appreciate that so much. I mean, I've seen you all, respond to your partnership and respond to other folks and say, we need to stop this. This isn't feeling good. And that takes a lot of boldness to kind of call out the process. Are there places in which you feel like you've really invited your partners in to adjust the process, taking it away from the traditional development process and really leaning into more of an equitable or community-driven process? Are there examples that you can provide that you've where you've said, no, we're going to slow down, or no, this isn't feeling good? Do you have examples like that you can share?
Yeah, I think one of the best examples is the co-development agreement that we had between us and Community Roots Housing. And we really had to stretch it out because in between every major decision point that we had to make, we needed to be advised. We needed to be advised by some other the developers of color to let us know, like, hey, is this for real? Like, is this something that we should be pushing back on? Or is this, why does this feel weird? And we needed our coach, and we needed the time to be able to ask questions and then go back to the negotiation table and say, hey, these are some of the sticking points. This is why we feel we should have this or this way. And I think that was just we went back and back and back. And to Sili's point earlier, is being able to have that like difficult conversation, because you are in a negotiation like table, but you're also in relationship with this other organization. And we had to develop trust, and we're constantly like pushing at that trust, because there's times when it just feels maybe it's because there's a sense of urgency and timelines fluctuate, but sometimes it feels like we're not being really explained what's going on. And that's where it was so important for us to be able to put the brakes on it and say, hey, we need to slow down, and we need to just learn what this actually means so that we can make an informed decision. And maybe we're going to land in the same place, right? Like maybe what you're offering is like the right answer, but it doesn't feel like the right answer. And we need to be able to like understand why. So I think a really good example too, well, I'll let Sili jump in.
I don't know why you do that. You were on a roll, dude. I think another example, as we have drawn up the kind of the paperwork around the project itself, we're pushing for majority ownership. When it came time for the transfer of the land, we were really clear, nope, it's coming to us. And we're also very clear about we want ownership of the hub. And as part of that, we are trying to figure out kind of ultimately what will be, how do we make sure that Duwamish is part of the kind of bottom line of all things. So we're in conversation with the Duwamish tribe. We're in the middle of figuring out our MOU with the tribe. The Duwamish Native Veterans Program will be housed here with us. So there's a genuine involvement and partnership with the Duwamish. And again, how do we kind of lean into the values of accountability to community? I mean, a lot of that is, we're kind of feeling it as we go. And when things happen that seem really it seems, oppressive or shitty or condescending, if you were a fly in our meetings, you would hear Aaron or myself or somebody else from the CDA, even our coach, you'd easily hear something like, that sounds like a bunch of doo-doo. I don't like that. And so, and then we explain why, right? Because, first of all, doo-doo is a very technical term. And second of all, we're not throwing the water out, the bath water out with the baby. We're just saying, hey, there's probably a use to this bath water. So why are we throwing it all out? So it's those kinds, again, everything takes time. You guys all know this, but our ability to really center and ground ourselves in community development is one of the best ways and the most powerful way to have an experience that means a lot to the communities that you guys are all accountable to. So,
And just a little, like, part of this whole process is also realizing that the entire process of getting affordable housing, like, development for that is inherently doo-doo, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense, and it is not set up to inherently build wealth for individuals, right? You're building these apartments that people are going to have to pay rent.
Yeah,
they're using this very whack formula that is still actually very expensive for folks to have to pay rent. And the entire system isn't really set up to help build wealth and build the community's capacity to, like, become owners and really invest in a project like this. So there are these moments where you're like, well, this is the only way we can go about actually doing development. So we have to go down this path and we have to learn what it means. But it is doo-doo, right? Like, it is just, that's the frustrating part. I think before this, I knew that there was parts of how to do development that I was like, man, this is just whack. I didn't know why. Now I know why. And I'm like, oh, I can't do anything about it. And I still have to go down this track.
mm-hmm.
The cool thing is it really does, like, inspire you to figure out, well, if we do want to do something different, like, this is how you do it, and it does help you, like, it's helped me become more hopeful, because now I know that there are alternative options out there. And it just takes a lot more work, it takes a lot more thinking creative, maybe scaling down a project. But
yeah, the other thing I want to add really quickly is that as we're doing this work, I'm very mindful of knowing that the people of color who are in the systems that we're working with are very limited. For example, our attorney, who is a woman of color, who is working on our MOU, we're advised, well, now we're going to this phase, you need a different kind of attorney. And we're like, why? We want this attorney. So really pushing back and saying, oh, you're saying our attorney can't figure this shit out? If Aaron and I can figure out this stuff, this is an attorney. Hello. So how do we help elevate, other people of color who are also in leadership roles and continue to lift their leadership and their wisdom to a place where they're seen as valid within their institution and within the system that they're working with? I mean, we still have to beat down the institutional side of our brothers and sisters, but we still need to make sure that, this is very rare that we have a person of color in a role that can touch this project. So how do we lift them up too? And so we hired 3 designers, 3 different separate firms, and all led by women of color. And so, you just have to keep asking yourself, is this what we wanted in the beginning? Is this what we really wanted? Is this what the community asked for? And really try to stay true to that. And so I know it's easy for me to talk about. I'm going to be 60 this year. I've been doing this shit for a long time, but so have many of you here. And I think what I always tell, the powers that be, the county, funders, foundations, I always tell them, the reason why I'm still here is because I believe in community. And if they would believe in community the way that we do, we could really move mountains. And so, so don't question us when we're putting something on the table. Um, and yeah, so I just wanted to say that.
Thanks so much, Sili. Our next question, it sounds like we have a question from the participants. So I want to go ahead and open us up. The last question that I had in kind of the formal questions, I think you've spoken to quite a bit, in particular around capacity building. You both shared that you came from education. You're experts in your community. And so that's given you the skills to work on this project, but there's some technical components that you've been building along the way, building with your coach, building through conversations with other groups that are doing development projects. But there's also development partners that you've been working with. And so are there other ways in which you have grown your capacity or your knowledge to help you navigate this process? You've spoken about, some of the adjacent lawyers and financial and architects that you've brought on that you share community with, but are there other ways in which you've been supplementing your expertise through your development partners or other partners? And then that is my last question, and we'll open it up for Q&A.
I think the best, it's like a language, right? Like this whole development stuff, you're talking about Qualic Bees and Light Tech and all these, like it really feels like it's a language. And like when you're trying to learn a language, I think the best way to learn is to immerse yourself in it. And that's what we did. So I think the last 3 years in itself has been like the biggest learning experience. And 3 years ago, if someone would have asked me to like sit in a room and explain this, I would have been freaking out. But now I'm a lot more confident in understanding how projects like this work. By no means am I an expert. Like I know that I have a ton that I need to keep learning and growing. But I honestly think, yeah, just by doing and asking to do it, asking to do the work, asking for help and feedback, whenever we're like submitting some type of funding request or some type of report, I don't even know how many times we review it with our development partners and with grant writers and with all these other folks who like fine tune it. But it really is us guiding the work. And then just training. There are so many, like last week, I just jumped in on a limited equity co-op session. And that was really cool to just sit there and learn about how other parts of the world, of the US are doing alternative housing projects. So there's these, one-off kind of opportunities to kind of grow your capacity. But I think just doing the work and like meeting with other pros, and I know Sili can speak to this, but really the Yodas out there in the world are the ones who are helping build up our capacity, who are willing to sit down and have coffee with us randomly on a Tuesday down at the ID. We're like, what is Light Tech? Why does everybody keep on like literally explain what it means? And that's how I think we've been able to build up our capacity.
Thank you. You're right. It's a whole different language. And I love, Aaron, how you're investing both in learning about the current process, but examining what we can do in the future. This is not the process we have to stay in. And you're really, I think, investing in that future as well.
And yeah, and those of you who know me well, know that I don't do wonky, right? And so a lot of the terms and a lot of the just the language and the lingo around community development, especially the technical side, we like to put our own spin. Like when we just got done doing a series of what Aaron and I refer to, the pimps and the hoes, and we're the hoes, and we're going in front of the pimps to get some money. So really, how do you, again, this isn't, this is part of, helps us understand that this is the game that we get put through. The process of an RFP is the same kind of thing. They dangle the money out there, and then we all, act like, oh shit, here comes the money. And then, but how do you stand in who you are around something, you're in the middle of a $13 million project. And so, but, also just being really, just being real about it too is very helpful.
So Sili, speaking of being real, there's a question in here. Thank you, Ebo, for this question. They wrote, I'm curious to know your experiences with collaborating with government entities. Any advice or wisdom you have to share about strategies when collaborating with government? And Ebo, if you have a follow-up or anything, feel free to just come off mute.
Yeah, Ebo, we got to have some drinks at some point,
Oh my God, please.
But, I jokingly say to the county staff, I feel like I'm on fucking staff here at the county as much as I talk to you guys. But, again, because I've been in this, I've been organizing for so long. I've been in nonprofits my whole professional career, with the exception of a stint at the city of Seattle. But, it's about relationships, Ebo. I think that's the best thing I could tell you, is that you also want the folks who are really inside the system trying to make change. You also want them to be your friends. So if you can get to a place where you can build relationships with the local government, they're gonna fuck shit up. Nobody fucks shit up more than institutions. And so I apologize for swearing so much. I get really passionate when we talk about, the gatekeepers. Local government, state government, even federally, and you all know that, can really do a number on how we're accountable to community. And so what I can say to that is the relationships matter. These relationships are on the, we're building them relationships because they matter to the families that we see in the community. And so that's really my best, Kai, get people like Kai. Kai's like my minion in the county. I'm like, Kai, check this out. It may have nothing to do with her department, but I will go to Kai because my relationship, right? So but then I also know Kai comes from a history of organizing, significant history of organizing here, her family. So how do we build those kinds of relationships that are really about building our family, but also building our trust with each other, especially as BIPOC community? I hope that was helpful. Adam, you got a little nugget of knowledge there you want to drop?
The local government should represent us, right? It's inherent in what it is. And we've known for so long that it hasn't. Historically, it hasn't. There's a lot of reasons why it hasn't. And when those moments of friction come up, I think it's important to be able to say it, right? It's important to be able to say, like, there's so many times when I get so frustrated because I'm like, why do we have to like beg and do, like, we're trying to do so much good work. And we know that this government system has, I always use this example. King County has a biannual budget of 12 billion with a B. And we're over here struggling to figure out how to do this work. And it's important to have those authentic relationships so that you can call it out and be authentic and don't be afraid. But you have to build that relationship and you have to make sure that it isn't transactional, because I think that's really where people kind of get lost in the sauce, where it feels like, all right, well, if you get the money, then, you owe us something, or no, we don't owe you anything. Like, you owe us, like, you should be doing this for us anyway. So I think that last piece of making sure that this isn't a transaction, this isn't a deal that we're doing on the side. Like, this is something that should have been happening for years and years and years anyway, that hasn't been. And those are difficult conversations, right? Because you're calling out people and you're calling out systems. So, yeah.
Thanks. The next question, is around, how you're willing to share and connect with other people. So Ginger asked, would you share documents that you've developed through the process? Also the connections and people that you've connected with. The second part of her question is sharing strategies in your capital campaign. So how did you go about the fundraising? And then, because I know a little bit about the project, would you also talk about the land? The land is King County lands. And can you share a little bit about that process of the land exchange as well?
So the Hub project is actually community. Remember I said Community Roots Housing is the developer, right? The Hub project is a part of a package that Community Roots Housing has put together. That package is called Rise Together. And so as part of that work, the developer, in this case, Community Roots Housing, actually hired a capital campaign manager who actually does all this stuff. And we actually asked at the beginning, is there any people of color that do that work? Well, there aren't. And so, but you know, we also need white accountable connections. And so, so to have somebody whose sole job is to focus on raising capital is really helpful. And then, so in this work of the Hub, there is a person who's also helping to raise capital funds for not only White Center, but for Capitol Hill, or for Africatown, for Bird Bar Place, for the LGBT housing, and then their art studio, I think. So, but the Community Roots Housing has been doing this forever, and they have money to hire a capital campaign manager who does this. And so we've never had a fund developer. This is true fact. The CDA has never had a fund development person prior to this project. We still don't. Let me make it really clear. We have a finance manager. Through this project, we realized, okay, we do need to strengthen and build our capacity around, you know, fundraising. We brought in a finance manager who has some of these skills, but it's definitely not a capital campaign manager. But we also don't have the money to hire that kind of expertise. So Ginger, take little bites at the strategy. And we can talk more about this later. We'd love to talk more about it. So without on, but we would love to just share with you kind of how we're looking at it and how we do this work in ways that are where we can really get our arms around it to make sense, to see what makes sense for our next way to grow and build our organization.
Yeah, I think like the people that you have connected with,
Mm-hmm.
Just to make the connection, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And in terms of documentation, I think it will be very helpful because, I mean, the whole development process, right? There are so many different documents there. And for me, that we are in the beginning stages.
Yep.
And I don't want to miss anything that we should have done. We should have thought about, right? And things, it's very clear we are all learning. We are all trying to do the best we can because the system has not been able to support our community, and we have to do it ourselves. So, by helping each other, we also hope that our project, when we get it done, it will be as a model to other people as well. So for just one example, talking about documentation or like what kind of funding is available for what, right? It's just the funding matrix. It's a one question, but I'm like, everybody's saying something that you don't really know because you have never done it before. What would that be helpful is to have a piece of documentation to say, if you're going to develop any housing project, have you thought about this funding? Have you thought about this funding and what this funding is for? And what would that be? What's the limitation? All those like in the matrix, that would be like, yes, right? You just pass on to another person, not like we're running around like a chicken without a head, right? And at the same time, Aaron, you say it so clearly, and also Sili, you try to talk to the system, they'll go around the bushes. They don't tell you what's going on, right? And they want to refer you to something else. And I was like, come on, we are talking about a community you haven't been able to serve. This is what you need to do. So don't defer me to something else. Say, hey, here's another opportunity you can buy, Come on, give me a break, right?
Mhm.
It's
So one of
something
the
that we need to do. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, one of the things I'm just kind of planting the seed to Kai and to Sarah is that, maybe we do one of these lunch and learns and bring in Joan, who's our capital development. I mean, the thing that was amazing to me, there's probably 5 white women who have the lock on this role in King County. Seriously. And so, but they also have this immense knowledge and the way that they're thinking about how to approach the money. I want to hear that, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe that could be a possible lunch and learn. Okay, thanks, Ginger.
I love that idea. I'm just writing in the chat also that part of the learning community is to really decentralize where knowledge is held, right? Our communities have been left out of these processes. And with learning community, we're looking to shift how we can actually take the knowledge that have been in these institutions, in these technical roles, and actually create more knowledge base within the community. So love the idea. All of you, if you have other ideas about how we can create these lunch and learns to be more helpful, please put them in the survey at the end or in the chat or reach out to us after. The last question we have time for, this has gone so fast, and hopefully we'll have a part 2, is speaking to what Aaron, you had been sharing, as well as you, Sili. You mentioned as you come across obstacles to doing development in a responsible and just way, having to recalibrate expectation based on realities of the current system, but while also finding creative ways to push the boundaries. Can you speak to some of the creative opportunities you see as possible future pursuits?
Yeah, I want to explore a regenerative approach to housing where we're taking land out of a system where it's basically just extracting funding into some private developer, some private investor, somebody who makes money, and then really giving the opportunity back to the local residents to build up equity in these projects. So if you would have asked me 3 years ago, what did I think about shared equity cooperatives? I'm like, what? Like, I don't actually own it. Like I own a stock or something. Like I just would have been like, no, that's wild. I'm not going to do that because I want a home and I want to be able to build wealth. And realizing that unless, like right now in the current environment, unless we do something different that allows people to build up small equity that allows access, there ain't it. There just isn't an accessible pathway to home ownership in King County. Like at least in here in the core area of King County, like it's too expensive. And we have to figure out creative ways to provide that. I think I would love to see different cooperative models that allow people to become co-owners in community. And then if they decide, after 20 years of living in this cooperative, they want to go off and venture and buy their own home in the private market, they can do that with the equity that they built in this model. So anyway, that's like a creative approach. I want to start looking into land banking, land trusts, are different things that we have to do it differently, because if we keep on building these 100 unit, 300 unit affordable housing development, like you're not going to build wealth. Your community is not going to build wealth. That at the end of the day, the light tech investor, they're going to get their money and they're going to dip out after 16 years, 15 years, and then another investor is going to come in or whatever, but the money is never going to grow and go back to the community. So I really, 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 really want to do something different that allows access to home ownership at an affordable place.
I guess my only advice, I guess what I want to see in the future is more young people at the tables. And you guys have probably heard, if you guys have heard me speak before, I've always saying about how, there's a lot of folks my generation, and I'm only speaking for Pacific Islanders, my generation, sometimes we just need to back up and get out of the way, because I feel like my work in this project, I feel like, okay, somebody gave me the opportunity to be in this position, number one, but also, what a great way to learn, to do development work. And the only reason we can maintain these learnings is really make sure young people are at the table who also have incredible wealth of knowledge that could be utilized in the community development field. We're not tapping into enough. And so, this is why I told I'm shifting you to this job. Too bad, so sad. You're going to do it. And, but I also know Aaron's generation, they have so many gifts. They're incredibly smart. They think about things. Aaron thinks about things that I would have never thought of. But, and some of the stuff that comes up, some of it is generational. But that's how we need to be forward thinking in the way that we look at this work. So yeah, that's my big advice. Sometimes we just need to be quiet, step back, let young people, let them guide us through this and have faith in them and believe in who they are. That's why they're in the mix. So young people are not in our circles by accident. They are there for a reason. So.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron and Sili, for sharing your learnings and wisdom today. Again, if people have questions, feel free to write them in the chat. We can respond to you. But thank you for really just being honest, sharing the good and the bad, the complicated, and just being yourselves. And I know from my experience working with you all that when you say you're willing to share and sit down for coffee, I know it's coming from the heart. So that's how so much of this knowledge has been developed, and encourage anybody on the call today to reach out to any of us. We're here. We also want to make these lunch and learns helpful and exciting and meaningful. So your suggestions are welcomed. And thanks for being here today with us. I appreciate all of you. And I feel lucky to call you my friends. I will pass it back now to, I think, Melissa, who will close us out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kai. And again, to echo your words, thank you so much, Sili and Aaron, for sharing your story with us. I just want to announce our next series of events, which is our next Lunch and Learn is on September 1st at the same time, 11 to 12. And we will have Leslie Bird and Ebo Jack from Alpha Sharp Development Partners, which is a Black-owned development firm that develops housing in Tacoma and Seattle. And so I think it'll be really interesting to hear their story from a slightly different perspective than the White Center CDA, more on the folks coming to this with a history of development. We will also be putting on an asset management workshop in October, so look out for dates for that. And then after that, we'll have our next Lunch and Learn in November. And I put my email in the chat, and I would love to hear from you all. If there are certain topics or organizations or speakers that you'd like to hear from. And I'll hand it to Sarah, because I know you also have another announcement.
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa. First, I just want to give my love and thanks to Aaron and to Sili. You both already know how much I love and respect you, and anytime we get to be in the same room is a joy. I'm so glad that we were able to hear from your expertise today, and for everyone else for bringing their questions and experience, and for Kai as well for facilitating and sharing your own deep experience and work in this community. I want to very quickly share that there's also going to be a workshop, a part 2 on capital campaigns coming up on August 20th. Caroline just shared the registration link for that in the chat. I really recommend that folks attend this if you can. Aaron was able to make it to the last one that we just had. And this time we're going to be taking a deeper dive into really looking at what makes an organization ready and what types of capacity are needed to actually launch a capital campaign, both in terms of the traditional sense of a capital campaign, the game aspect that Aaron and Sili spoke to, but also integrating community-driven, community-centric fundraising principles. And this is actually being led by Ji Young Dobbs, who is a BIPOC capital campaign consultant. So again, a rarity. Yeah, Sili's laughing because we know it's true. With an opportunity to also sign up for a one-on-one consult. So I think that this could be a really great starting point or continuing point for many of you in building the type of relationships and sharing expertise with one another as we've spoken to today. So I wanted to make sure that we included that in there. And I'll hand it back to Melissa.
And since we are running out of time, Caroline is going to send out a survey via email. And so please look out for that. And we look forward to hearing from you what you liked about this conversation and what you want to see more of in future conversations, as well as ideas for future programming. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Kai, Sili, and Aaron for being here and for sharing your story.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank
I
you
just
so
put
much.
in a chat here, Kai, if you are. Okay.
Yes, I
Okay,
just
got it.
typed in my email, right?
All right, thank you.
Yes.